Today's episode of Poets at War is sponsored by the following.
Hello, I'm Sarah Levesque, Editor-in-Chief of Logo Sophia magazine. I would like to invite you to explore our Pilgrim's Journal of Life, Love, and Literature, both in visual format and in podcast format. Our goal is to help bridge the gaps between different Christian denominations and traditions. Please visit our website at logosophiamag.com to read or listen to stories, articles, poetry, and more, all for free. We look forward to journeying with you.
This time on Poets at War, our General Joshua David Link speaks to Matthew Pilgrim, the Free Narnian on Twitter, about C.S. Lewis and his own books, and many other things. Join us in the trenches for Poets at War!
I think I met, was it Sarah or Ian that recommended you to me for this?
It would have been Ian.
It would have been Ian? That's what I thought, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know Ian?
I know Ian through Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
We're Twitter mutuals where we on the same group chat together, and so we communicate from time to time. And I've also contributed to Logo Sophia magazine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
yep,
we have a repertoire through that as well.
Well, that's cool. Yeah. So you do. I've put some of your stuff together with the audio magazine, so I'm familiar with some of that. I don't get to listen to everything each time, just because Sarah does the bulk of the actual, detail editing of those sorts of things, and then gets them to me, and I put all the spicy mustard on it and make it look good and upload it. But yeah, I've known Ian and Sarah for a while. You guys are Twitter mutuals, you and Ian. What do y'all usually talk about on Twitter?
Usually we talk about anything relating to or tangential to sci-fi, fantasy, writing.
Mm-hmm.
Hashtag writing stuff.
Yes.
Occasionally Christian memes of one flavor or another. But that's how at least I remember him when I first came across him was through writing stuff and his illustrations that he does for his. He does his own illustrations, but he also works on commission for other people.
Yeah.
And, I think that's actually how I first found him, was him posting his fantasy art.
He is so good at his art. I tell you what, he's just
he's great. I like how he's bold enough to go with all kinds of different creatures.
Mm-hmm.
He has quite a expansive creature portfolio, which I, as someone who is really into fantasy, I appreciate a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So fantasy, sci-fi, that's sort of your big sort of thing. This is obviously the first time we've talked. For people who are listening, obviously they're not listening right now, but they will be soon. The idea is that I basically talk to other artists. I don't know if you've heard the podcast. Have you or no?
Yes, I've listened to a few episodes.
Okay.
To prepare for coming on.
Yeah. So you know the drill. But yeah. So basically, and I'm gonna look all over the place since I don't have a person to immediately talk to. I'll look at the camera occasionally, but I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing with my eyes in this situation, because most of mine have been video for a little while. But that's okay, not a problem. So basically, my questions are going to be pretty broad, more just kind of getting to know you. You say you're into fantasy. That's obviously hugely broad. I'm guessing Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia are up in that range too?
Yes. Well, I can narrow it down for you a bit if that helps.
Sure.
So I myself have a short story up on Amazon Bella that is a sword and sorcery story in the vein of Robert E. Howard's Solomon Kane. So Robert E. Howard, Lovecraft are kind of the major influences on me artistically.
Okay.
I go by the Free Narnian on Twitter. Okay. So I'm very familiar with Lewis. So so any Lewisian topic we could discuss ad nauseum. Cool. as much as you're willing to. So that's kind of my shtick, my field, my forte.
What's the name of your novella? We'll plug it at the end too, so people remember. But what is it called? Right off the top?
It's called The Hall of Horror, and you can look up my name too, Matthew Pilgrim. It's up there. It's just a couple of episodes. It's fairly short. You can read it, in one sitting, no problem. It's sword and sorcery horror, and again, as I say, kind of inspired by the Solomon Kane stories.
Gotcha.
Set though in an original fantasy setting.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with those, but I'm gonna have to look into them. I know Lovecraft to a certain extent. Is that just like because you're wanting to write more closely to horror and creatures? Is that the kind of thing that links? Because I'm hearing you talk about Ian's creatures. I'm hearing you talk about Narnia. It seems like you're more in the darker side of fantasy. Is that what I'm guessing, or am I completely off?
Well, to a degree, I would like to write horror too. Lovecraft mostly I like, not necessarily because of the horror elements or the horrificness to his tales, but his sense of wonder that he's actually able to convey. And he actually writes about this in his own literary essays, his own literary critique of his own cosmicist genre, where he even writes that to a degree that he writes horror just because the evocative nature of the horror genre allows him to come up with scenarios that invoke an emotional sense or of wonder at just kind of like, the blank edges of the map in terms of time and space. And it's like the horror itself is almost a means to an end in a way. And it's just like that's just the easiest way to get to that point. So I look at it that way. I'm also just an admirer of his prose in general and his style. I think especially his later work, he's able to marry together a sense of the erudite with, so as he gets to be more influenced by Howard and some of the other pulp writers, with a very energetic, action-oriented flavor, and it makes something really unique and special, and it's something that I kind of mold my own developing craft after.
See, the way you're talking, I can definitely tell you read more than I do. and I don't say that like I don't read. I actually had a situation semi-recently where I was listing off a whole in The Brood. I don't know. Do you know about The Brood or no?
No.
Okay. The Brood I can add you to if you want, if you're on Facebook. I can't remember. It's a messenger thing. And the only reason it's there is because I can't seem to get people to migrate. But basically there we have a group of people who are kind of tangentially connected to me. It started as one thing, moved into another, and it's nicknamed The Brood. It's technically called the Wonder Brood, as a joke on Wonder Bread. The original name was the Brood of Writers, which Matthew Bush coined as a joke, and we wanted to include more people, so it became not just writers, so it became the Wonder Brood. But anyway, the idea is just kind of Lewis-y, Tolkien-y people, artists, poets at war, tangential people getting together and talking, and we do everything from memes to really like delving into each other's work, etc. So if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know. But basically the in the Brood, there was this moment where we were kind of joking. We were actually riffing off on ideas like if you could have this book rewritten in the style of someone else, like what would you come up with? And we were hearing like all kinds of crazy stuff, like I mean the funny ones were things like the Lord of the Rings by C.S. Lewis, like, you know, the short version, you know.
The short, where Santa Claus shows up, and
hey,
right.
I mean, Tom Bombadil's there too. The people rag on both sides, but the fact is, like, they are both seemingly out of nowhere, but seemingly have a much deeper point to them. I'll get to that another time, or we can get to that in a minute if you want. But the point was, I was naming off so many different books and authors that even if I hadn't read them, I knew the Spark Notes version, or I had heard them through TV or audio, or, you know, actually listen to the audio book. I'm an audio guy because of the fact that I'm dyslexic, and it just helps me a lot more. And I don't see things backwards. It's a whole other thing, but I can't just look at a page and really get much out of it. But hearing you and some of the phrases and words that you're using to describe styles, I can tell you're really into reading and writing. And that's something that excites me and makes me want to read your stuff all the more. I guess, you know, I guess we can, if you don't have any more on that, you can go into that if you want. But if you're don't have anything more on that, let's open up the Bombadil / Father Christmas can of worms if you want. Are you into that?
Well, I mean, to a degree, I know most of the, you know, I am definitely a Bombadil fan.
Yes.
Absolutely. I do not side with the opinion that like it's unnecessary or anything like that. I think that, you know, there's been enough. I mean, there's really nothing meaningful I can add myself. Maybe right. To maybe veer into something else, because I think there's enough Tolkien people commentating. You know, it's demonstrable how necessary and serviceable it is into the narrative as a whole, and kind of like, you know, Tom Bombadil is the beginning of the fairy story.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. What about Father Christmas?
Yeah, Father Christmas is part, you know, because Lewis took, you know, I mean, something that was developed. Again, I don't know how familiar you are with gaming, if you're part of the gamer world or not, but you know, some of the best game settings. You think of Warcraft, you think of Elder Scrolls, some bigger fantasy stuff. The people who built the worlds for those games took an approach that Lewis took for Narnia. They're like, we're going to take everything that we like and that we think is cool, and we're going to put it all in here, and people are going to look at it and love it, and it's going to be great and fun. And that was
and we'll tie it together principle. Later.
Yeah, right. It's like, you know. So yeah, Lewis comes up with these situations in Narnia where there's Father Christmas. There's Bacchus, there's like Neptune and Bacchus work for Aslan. Mm-hmm. You know, put that in, right? You know, and with it's just great. It's, you know, it's based off of the principle. It's the same. Lewis, it's his own means of achieving a different end, of achieving a sense of wonder, mm-hmm. right? Of achieving a sense of just awe at imagination, and you know, not for its own sake, I'd say. You know, it's not just imaginative to be imaginative, but it's imaginative in order to, you know, really I'm trying to articulate properly how it brings you back to a sense of playfulness, mm-hmm. and you know, broad, you know, a broad minded approach to things, and just opening yourself up to experiencing the fantastical, which is what Narnia is all about. It's about experiencing the fantastical to learn truths about the everyday. That's kind of like the overarching thing of each Narnia chronicle.
Yeah. Are you into fan theories?
Some, if they're fun, some are kind of mundane.
I got a fun one I can float at you. Okay. Father Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. I have an explanation for him in Narnia.
What's that?
Really makes sense. So you got a situation in Magician's Nephew, King Frank and Queen Helen. You're familiar, yes?
Mm-hmm.
First king and queen of Narnia. Well, they went and had kids, as you do. As we know in Narnia's history, there were many kings and queens before the Telmarines came in and everything else.
Right.
So we know that they had children. Let's say one of their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, he was so fascinated by our world, by the fact that they had come from another world and were never going back. And so he continually asked questions about this world and was fascinated by its history. And one of the stories that was given to him was the story of St. Nicholas.
Okay.
And so he was so fascinated by the story of St. Nicholas that he wanted to bring it to Narnia and started to do it of his own volition. As best as he could, of course, because he has no magic. Aslan comes and says, "You are very, very generous. And because of your generosity, I want to grant you this, but you have to do something." Sends him on a quest. This is its whole story by itself. I'm not going to go into many more details, but he comes back, he finishes the quest. Aslan grants him immortality and the magic he needs to be Father Christmas to Narnia forever. There you go.
That is far and above higher quality than the average fan theory out there. I like that.
Yeah.
That works. That works really well.
It checks all the dots.
Yeah, no, that's a Narnian chronicle right there. You did it.
I may write it one day for fun, but it's one of those things where I don't do a lot of fan fiction just because I got so many of my own ideas. But yeah, that's my head canon for Father Christmas.
No, I dig it. I can totally see that you hit it. Like you said, you hit every major thing that would need to be checked for a Narnian chronicle. Well done.
There you go. So, and it's generally the way Lewis thinks. Moving into some of his other stuff. The Pendragon and That Hideous Strength. You've read that one, That Hideous Strength?
Embarrassingly, I have not read all of it.
Oh, okay. So you're going to need to read that. Do you know about the Pendragon or no?
No, that's not one of the ones that I know. I know mostly the major science fiction stuff like Nice and was that, or am I thinking? Yeah, that's That Hideous Strength, right? That's the conclusion of the space trilogy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I know have more of the general plot, but that's not the one. I only know of the only ones out of the space trilogy I've read is Out of the Silent Planet and Paralandra.
Okay, so you have not read That Hideous Strength yet. Okay, That Hideous Strength is really a book unto itself in many ways. It even though it builds upon what happened in Paralandra and Out of the Silent Planet, it's very different. The space trilogy is so weird. It took me forever to finally get through it because I wanted to read it in order. I wanted to know all the backstory, and Paralandra ended up being my favorite. I'm one of the very few who love Paralandra because I listened to it and it felt like dialogue because most of the book is dialogue, as you probably well know. And so it's enjoyable because of that in audio form. However, Out of the Silent Planet drags. It's some of Lewis's earlier work. And then That Hideous Strength, for the story itself, I like more than Paralandra. I like the execution of Paralandra better when it's read aloud. The basically, like, I won't go. I'm not going to go into detail on any of that hideous strength, but it's just one of those things where, people say currently, and the things we're going through in the world, we're dealing with Brave New World or 1984. Most people fall into one of two camps or try to say some version of both. I find more and more that we are more that hideous strength than any other.
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely, what our world is going through now in spades. They even had like race riots being put on by the liberal elites. In that hideous strength, like, they actually hired Welshmen to come in, like rowdy Welshmen to come in and do construction and stuff, so they would be at the bars and the taverns and causing all kinds of mayhem. It's ridiculous.
Lewis was a very astute observer of not just the human condition as it relates to just Christian living and the Christian metaphysic, but sociologically. I mean, if Lewis wasn't a fiction writer, I'd say that he would have become one of the great sociologists of the 20th century, because he had such a grasp of macro trends and politics, and the recurring theme. I know generally that hideous strength, but it's something that comes up in a few places. There's even like a version of it in the Narnian Chronicles of the Silver Chair, right? This the renegade scientist, or like the spiritualist materialist.
Oh, you mean not the Silver Chair, the magician's nephew, right?
I don't think Uncle Andrew was mostly like an occultist. I'm thinking when the Green Lady works her spell.
Okay.
On
Rillian.
Who is it there? It's
Rillian.
Rillian. Yeah. No, but when the kids are there with Puddleglum.
Yeah, Puddleglum, right? And Eustace and Jill. Yeah.
Yeah. The spell that she weaves with her song, right, and her lute, where she ends up arguing a materialist metaphysic. Mm-hmm. Right, that like all that right. So like
using magic, by the way, she was using magic to argue a material. Anyway,
exactly. She was using a supernatural thing to argue that there was no supernatural, right? She was using anti-empirical means to argue for an absolute empiricism, right? All that exists is what you can see, and all you can see is underland, and there is no sky, there's no anything about, right? And Lewis is, and then of course this plays a huge role in the Screwtape letters. I think where Lewis via Screwtape states out explicitly the man who declares that there's nothing but matter and the reactions of matter, but who also believes in unseen forces and impulses and personalities, and that, I think, absolutely nails the head of the spiritual development, or retrogression, perhaps is a better word, not development, the degeneration that we're experiencing in a lot of fronts today, because you see people talk like this.
Yeah.
This is that is not an uncommon thing. You look at people who are, you interact or you read things written by self-described atheists or secularists, but they are very much able, freely experiment with, basically what comes down to occult perspectives or philosophies or techniques, and they couch it with, it's a psychological thing. It's really a psychological process. I think I heard this, the infamous. Who was one of the new atheists? It was Sam Hyde, right? Where he talks about Buddhist meditation now, and like he has a rationalization about how it's not really a religious practice. And it's like, wow, Lewis, man, he was there. He was there like almost 100 years ago now. You saw it coming.
Now I don't know what denomination you are. Can I ask?
Yeah, I'm a non-denominational Protestant.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
I lean more towards Lutheranism, but
okay, all right, yeah. I'm Reformed Presbyterian, so we're very, very close. In just general, stuff. Let me ask: have you ever heard of a guy named Cornelius Van Til?
I feel like I have. I've seen that name somewhere before, but I can't attach a person to it.
Okay. Sarah Levesque was talking to me recently about another episode I did with Joffrey the Giant, Joffrey Swaite. And he and I are Presbyterian, and we were talking, and we were using a lot of shorthand in what we were speaking about. And so I was going to bring this up to you because we're totally getting into the same point with Lewis, etc. There's a weird thing going on right now, and this is very like high level philosophical stuff about apologetics that is going on in our sort of Reformed Protestant, adjacent world, Lutherans, everyone else in that whole sector right there, where we believe in an established church, but we think of it more Protestantly, Mm-hmm. So basically we have on one side the sort of Reformed Thomist position, which is not the liberal Thomist position, that basically argues for classical evidence-based apologetics for the sake of the fact that even pagans can reason. Right, they can use reason, and that they have mental faculties to argue and reason through things. And then we have Van Til, and there are some people who followed what Van Til said and did some weird things with it. But basically what Van Til says is you have a set of presuppositions. Every single person has them, and they will not change those based on evidence. The thing that changes it is the Holy Spirit. And so what you need to do in practice, not all the time, but much of what your focus needs to be in apologetics is attacking their presuppositions and saying, if you presuppose that nothing really matters, then why are you arguing with me? Mm-hmm. Right? Right. So the Thomists would say, you're not giving them their God-given credence, or you're not giving God-given credence to their ability to reason, and and you don't care about their immortal soul. You're not trying to win them if you just attack their presuppositions. I don't see those as mutually exclusive, right? At all. We use the argument to attack the presuppositions to get the attention. And then we can talk evidence. We can talk and point out how our presuppositions do fit. And I think a lot of people don't get to that point when they use the presuppositional argument. You follow me? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, but I just, we're talking about this, and the presup is coming up big time here, talking about the Lady of the Green Kirtle using magic to argue for not magic. Like,
right. Well, I mean, to that, I wouldn't want to speak out of turn or to get out of my own lane, because far be it for me to suggest strategies for apologetics.
You're a Christian. You have the Holy Spirit in you. But yeah, I hear you. I understand. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, generally, though, I would say that probably it's got to be a case-by-case thing, because different people will believe what they believe for different reasons. Exactly. Even if a group of people share the same belief, each individual within that collective will have a center to that belief for different things. So I would say probably, generally though, I think that the attacking the presupposition is a worthy endeavor, because just from what I've observed, just living in the world that we do, that seems to be what guides most people.
Yes.
And I think although going undermining or arguing against these presuppositions, again, depending on who they are, is a much harder task than might be supposed. Than even discussing evidence or logic and reason, because some of these things are so deeply held. And
right. In a way, it can be harder, but in a way, you're just digging deeper and deeper, and things become more and more abstract. Whereas you know that there's an end, right? So you're just trying to find the end, which that's more of a linear path than the evidential path, which is more lateral, right? You're going from this argument to this argument to this argument, and you never really get down deep. You follow me? And so like it's like a trench that ends in a point. If you keep going down, you'll eventually reach the point. Right. As opposed to staying up on the surface and just playing with the lateral. Now you may need to move laterally because you might be hitting some veins as you go down and really hurting the individual, and that doesn't help Christ or the situation. I'm not saying be seeker sensitive. I'm not saying, be kind necessarily, but what I'm saying is be kind as far as you can without giving up ground in the argument, right?
Yeah, no, that would make sense.
Yeah,
I would. Yeah, I see that.
As I didn't mean to go super deep in this, but it's just one of these things that's been on my mind, and the place we were going and talking, I think, really lended credence to bringing it up and getting your thoughts on the situation. So, but yeah, so what are your plans as an author, going forward? Are you trying to make this a career? Or are you doing this as a hobby? What's the end goal with what you're doing?
Long-term plan is to make it into a career. That's a longer, obviously, right now in the immediate, that's not viable for me for my situation. But yeah, long-term plan is to make it into a career. What I'm working on now, what I guess I could say, is I want to have a backlog of work that is ready to be published.
Okay.
And so right now I'm writing, and I want to be done with several different projects. And then this is my goal for the short term, is that I want to be able to just spend like a year where all I do is publish and market. Just publish myself and market myself, and I don't have to worry about writing anything new for about a year, because I have all these other things stacked up, and then I can focus. Do some
editing, but yeah, other than
editing, they're edited, they're ready to go, right? Yeah. But so that all that needs to be done is just getting them out there and then telling people about them. Gotcha. That's my goal. That's what I'm doing right now.
I got you.
Working towards that.
Well, that's the one thing that I would question in that, and this is just as a friendly thing. And I don't mean it like super serious or anything. You do what you need to do. But basically the one thing I would go is, if you're finding marketing wise that the thing that you are creating, or things that you're creating, don't have as much as a market as you want, and you end up wanting to do another project because of the fact that you see a hole in the market, that needs to be taken into account, in my opinion. But that's me. Like I said, it might not be you, and things work for you that don't work for me. I know that for a fact, because we're all different. God has made us all different, right? So I'm couching that saying, don't take my advice at face value unless you think there's something there, right? But that'd be my point. What do you think of that?
No, that's a very good point. And this is just a general. Well, obviously, as things change, there might be 1 month from now there might be a new opportunity that existed, or I come up with something better. Of change things. I'm just speaking. All I can speak to is what I know as of now, right? In this moment, and so that's
my stuff changes all the time, and it drives people who follow me nuts. But I'm trying to get to where that, and this is something that has changed on a macro level for me over time. I have found ways to continually publish and tie and give context to things that make the ADD of bouncing around all the time from topic to topic, whether it's this podcast or my own stories or the other things that I do. It makes it palatable and for people who eventually they're just interested in what cool thing does Joshua have to show, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not necessarily personality driven, although that's part of it. It ends up being more like, I am a personality who also curates, right? And so I do my own thing. I do my own stories, and I also do readings, of other stories. I do, other poetry and that sort of a thing from other poets and artists and other things. And I'm able to kind of show it as this big tapestry that I can continually put out TikToks and this and that and the other and other things like that over time. And I can still tie together. It's almost like that one friend that you have, and we probably have several at this point, that's kind of like Bilbo Baggins, who most like hobbits are like, oh, he's this long-winded whatever, but he's actually kind of like a little bit of a scholar, if you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Like he's an archivist. He collects things and puts them together in his library.
Yeah, well, he's a master of lore.
Right, exactly. A lore master, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's kind of the vein I'm finding myself in, is a lore master who also creates his own stuff and puts it in places where people can digest it in chunks and chapters and that sort of a thing. And people tend to like it, it seems. So I'm definitely growing. It's slow, but I'm growing, and it's consistent, which I like. So that's just a macro thing, though. I can take my ADD, I can take my crazy libraries and whatever else, and just package them in a way to take people along a journey, right? So,
that is a very good thing to be. I think going forward at this moment in history, especially amongst the Christian community, is we need archivists. Mm-hmm. In an age of total fabrications and manipulations. I think and losing a lot of stuff. People talk about digital erasure of documents and sources. So I think the more people, I myself kind of just hobbyistically, whenever I come across something, I back it up to a spare disk drive and stuff to keep a hard copy on a hard drive so that it doesn't, if there's ever a cloud shutdown or whatever, anything. I think any kind of anything that is of any scholarly or artistic merit that someone can preserve should. It doesn't matter how many people or wherever they are, right? That anyone can do it, right? But to some degree, and I think that is an important mission, just generally, just kind of broadly.
And that's one of those things that, I praise God so much, for our current day and age, regardless of all the bad stuff, because Alexandria is never going to happen again. The Library of Alexandria, that's never going to happen again. The fact is, somebody's got it backed up somewhere, right? I've had so many people bring this up, and it's so funny. I've only brought it up a handful of times myself, but the movie Serenity, based off the TV show Firefly, have you seen that or no?
No, I haven't.
Do you know about Firefly or no?
I know of it.
Okay. Well, basically, in this whole situation, this is a side character that shows up for the movie. He's not in the show; he's only in the movie. He is known as Mr. Universe, and he's this hacker nerd with a robot wife that he built for himself. A real nerd. And he lives off in his little satellite special place somewhere, and the good guys go and they have to talk to him to get some information during the story and figure a few things out. Well, anyway, his whole thing and his whole point, he comes into the story much later with other stuff that ends up happening, but his whole thing is he's constantly watching, he's constantly archiving, and he's constantly just in touch with all, like he can hack into any security camera in the known galaxy, right? So he's just like constantly watching, looking, monitoring, maintaining, archiving, et cetera, and he's sort of like Anonymous is now, right? Anonymous, the hacker group, right? And so he has this phrase that he uses multiple times, and it has one of those, you know, special resolution moments where it's used again toward the end of the movie. I won't spoil that, but it's can't stop the signal. You can't stop the signal. It's somewhere, it can be found, and someone has it. You know what I'm saying? It's backed up somewhere. And that's one of those things that I'm so thankful to God for, because the redundancy is like the only way that anything could be completely and totally erased at this point is if God himself did it. You know what I mean? There's just not enough omnipresence of any other entity in order to completely eradicate any truth. You know? No,
that's true. You're right. And again, especially, so long as that, even if there's a few people who, you know, act responsibly and, you know, and they do what they can, for sure. They'll never be able to have, well, I suppose, right, you know, but and to kind of maybe turn that on its head a little bit, right, that they could take, you know, some other entity would take more of the Fahrenheit 451 approach, where the censorship is mere formality, where like the actual trick is to establish a population that is apathetic towards their own censorship.
Right. Yep, that's a thing, and the only way that happens. But the fact is, once again, they cannot universally apply apathy.
That's true.
They can't.
They couldn't in the book either, right?
And this is another part. You know, I'm working on a kind of a book, but also just like my podcast is my book, my nonfiction book in a way. You know, and I say it at the end of every episode: be your family's bard, right? And what I mean by that is partially being the archivist for your family. That includes all the family stories, genealogies, you know, all the truth of your family that has been handed down from generation to generation. People don't realize, like, not all of that is backed up on a cloud. Not even the stuff from your own grandparents. You know what I'm saying? Like your job, and when I say your job, I mean whoever you are in your family, whether you're brother, sister, mother, son, you know, whatever, husband, etc. Your job, in essence, if this is what God has put on your heart through the Holy Spirit, is to archive, to tell, to remind, to be that source of truth from the past in order to know where we're at and where we're going, right? And I love talking about this in general, and that's, like I said, eventually I'm gonna just pull these podcasts together and edit them into a book of some kind, you know, whatever. But that's kind of the crux of what we're getting at, and it sounds like you've got your head on straight as far as that goes, even with your own the creating of your own worlds and stories. And I'm looking really forward to seeing what else you can come up with, and hopefully get in your book at some point. Yeah. So even though we're a little bit short, I think it would be a good time for us to move along. I got stuff going today. I know you probably do too. And we'll definitely do this again. If you can think of another topic to do, we'll definitely do this again.
Oh, absolutely. I've had a great time. I'd love to come on again.
Wonderful, man.
This has been a great conversation.
Well, let me go ahead and wrap the episode, and we'll talk a couple more minutes, and then we'll wrap. Okay. So everyone, remember, Be your family's bard. Do not turn to the right or to the left, and the Lord will be with you wherever you go. We'll see you all next time in the trenches on Poets at War.
God of song, said the warrior bard, though all the world betray thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful harp shall praise.